sleep issues are just huge, and you do a great job in your book. I think you say, "Get some sleep, you big dummy," something like that. And Tammy, you're facing some enormous challenges in fire due to the current economy. It's making it worse with sleep deprivation in your guys. What kind of things are you seeing?
I think public safety has always had challenges with sleep. Whether it's from the catecholamines that we were discussing, the stress hormones, or just the cycle that we're in. Both police officers and firefighters have a lot of stimulation in their job. So it's really hard to normalize from that unless you can get away from the stimulation, one. And two, you actively try to deal with adrenal, which means you have to be able to do an aerobic or an anaerobic or a weightlifting type of movement for an extended period of time to be able to deal with that adrenal that you have flowing through your body. Some of the things that have changed in fire service for me is that I have less stations open, I have less personnel, and I have more calls. In a down economy, we always have challenges with that. So my guys are on shift for 48 hours at a time, and they're at my downtown stations, they could be running 48 calls in that 48 hours. So the stress is enormous. And Robb brought up a really good point when he was talking about my arm and how you can create that with just sleep deprivation. So can you talk a little bit more about that and that whole concept and how that works?
Yeah, I mean, we still aren't super sure what's happening, but we know clinically for sure that just like a night of missed sleep or poor quality sleep can make an individual as insulin resistant as a type 2 diabetic. And then, we were talking off camera a minute ago where you mentioned that, your folks were on a different schedule where they were 24 on, 24 off, 24 on, 24 off for a block of time and then like 4 days off. And over the course of that time, like blood pressure would stair step up. And this is really consistent with what we see in, somebody eating themselves into a type 2 diabetic insulin resistant state, elevated insulin levels. We get elevated aldosterone. The aldosterone causes retention of sodium. Retain sodium, you retain water, and the blood pressure goes up. And then you mentioned that by day 3 of the 4 days off, the person hit a normal baseline. And so out of like a 30-day period, the person has maybe like 2 or 3 healthy days. And that's a big deal. And then if you throw on top of that, like the downtime things that folks are oftentimes doing, like playing video games and whatnot, it's not simply rack time. It's not just being in the, the bed, being unconscious. It's actually photo period, like how much light you're getting in your eyes and interacting with your brain and how that influences different hormones like growth hormone and, leptin and melatonin and all that. A lot of the elective activity that people are doing is like playing video games. It's trying to wind down watching TV or something, which isn't really helping them at all. And it's tough. Like, it's a really tough scenario. And then you throw on top of that a high-carb diet, particularly refined, like soda, juice, the energy drinks, that's a huge problem. If you add a super therapeutic dose of stimulants, caffeine and all the rest of that stuff, then you've got a problem with that. In the military, they have like go and no-go, amphetamine type things, and then, Lunesta type stuff to take people offline. When you get taken offline with something like Lunesta, it makes you unconscious. You're not sleeping. And you need to go through these like level 3-4 stages of sleep to get normal restoration of your immune function and insulin sensitivity and all that. So a lot of the practices that we're using to help people really aren't helping them. Just simply taking someone offline and making them unconscious, whether it's alcohol or Lunesta or whatever, isn't giving them good quality sleep. It may even be worse than not doing it at all. So we have some serious systemic issues that we're dealing with. And then when we get in to recommend a dietary protocol to support this situation, it's inevitably high carb, low fat. And we go to our powers that be to find a a way through that morass, and it's not a good solution. We're not going to change a scenario in which our service personnel are not going to be sleep deprived. That's going to happen, but we can find strategies of helping them to better manage their sleep when they do get to sleep, and then give them nutritional and exercise recommendations that can help support that. Yeah.
One of the things that I've found over my 24 years in this job is, in public service, is that when I'm under stress, I'm kind of like Pavlov's dogs.
Mm-hmm.
That alarm goes off or that radio goes off, and we immediately respond to that. Our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate goes up, and then afterwards, I crave sugar.
Right.
Talk to me about that.
So when you are under a stress response, you release cortisol, you release epinephrine, norepinephrine, basically adrenaline. All of those things mobilize carbohydrates out of your liver because it's the fight or flight response. And so under a normal fight or flight scenario, that cortisol will mobilize lipids, the fats for energy. It'll mobilize carbohydrates out of the liver. That's good if we're running up and down stairs and hauling somebody around and we're doing some physical activity. It's really bad if we get stressed and we're sitting, because then we've done effectively like eating a candy bar. We've got high circulating lipids, high circulating glucose. That stuff causes all kinds of nasty stuff to the vascular endothelium. So we've got that problem. But then after that event, our brain knows that we just blew some of our emergency reserve of carbohydrate out of the liver. And so we immediately want some carbohydrate to replace that. And that's where we start craving that. And when you add to that when people are insulin resistant from sleep deprivation, then we're going to tend to get more carbohydrate cravings out of that. So you add stress and then also the sleep deprivation, and it's a gnarly combination.
With the paleo diet, where you're really changing the percentages of carbohydrates and proteins and fats, over time, would that help mitigate some of those cravings?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's an interesting thing, that if we push people more towards that ketogenic or quasi-ketogenic kind of state, if you can entrain the body to run on ketone bodies instead of glucose, then you've got a buffer against that stress response. If the individual can only run on glucose, if they're insulin resistant, they really are not running on fat at all. Like, they literally cannot access fat for energy at all. They can only use glucose. It's hard to get the glucose through the blood-brain barrier and through the other body tissues for them to use it. If you get a blood sugar crash, that is hugely stressful, because the brain can die from a blood sugar crash. So then it will tweak that liver to release glucose in a very kind of vicious fashion. If you can get people more entrained to use lipids or fats as an energy source, and they're a little bit more ketogenic driven, we have I think something like, even a lean muscular person has like 10 marathons worth of energy stored as body fat. So if your body is running off of body fat, you tend to be less prone to these stressful highs and lows of blood sugar, because you've got a buffer. You have a kind of a insulation there. When I did this Discovery Channel show, I Caveman, we had to live like cavemen, and I basically spent 8 days not eating a whole lot of anything, and then on day 8 we killed an elk, and life was better. But they checked my blood glucose levels on day 8. I hadn't eaten anything in 8 days. Going into the show, I was already keto adapted, and my blood glucose was 33, which the doctor was like, this just can't be, and they ran it 3 or 4 times. I'm like, no, it's completely normal. If you keto adapted, that's completely doable. If you're not keto adapted, that could kill you. Like our average insulin resistant individual, if they were driven via a stressful event and a lack of food to a blood sugar of 33, they might die. It'd certainly be unconscious.
If we responded on you and did a blood glucose level on you, we would give you glucose at 33.
Yeah. But, I was active, I was conversing with people, I wasn't lethargic or cognitively impaired at all with this low blood glucose level. And so it kind of stress inoculates you when you can be more keto adapted, more fat adapted, even in these kind of austere situations. And then if you do, let's say you get put through a really hard workout or a super hard call that was really physically demanding, maybe after that workout or that call, you might do more of a protein carb meal to restore some muscle glycogen stores. But it's going to be a punctuated event in a period, that post-workout period, when you're more insulin sensitive, and we might throw in like some chromium picolinate and some alpha lipoic acid to improve insulin sensitivity, and then we get you back to kind of a keto eating, and so it's more of a cyclic ketogenic diet. And we just get huge mileage out of that with athletes, which I consider police, military, and fire basically warrior athletes. Like the demands of what you're doing versus a professional athlete is indistinguishable from what I can see.